In this episode, we speak with Sean Duffy, the co-founder and CEO of Omada Health, a virtual-first healthcare provider that nurtures lifelong health one day at a time. Since 2011, Sean and his team's mission has been to inspire and enable people everywhere to live free of chronic disease. They do this by building digital health programs that are evidence-based, performance-priced, and designed to delight their users. Omada is backed by Andreessen Horowitz, Norwest Venture Partners, Fidelity, Wellington Management, and other notable investors. I am your host, RJ Lumba. We hope you enjoy the show. If you like the episode, click to follow.
RJ Lumba is the managing partner of GrowthCap and the executive chairman of Market Insight Media. He is the host of Growth Investor, a podcast featuring today's best investors, executives, and founders. In the minutes ahead, we'll uncover insights and strategies for accelerating growth and succeeding in business.
Sean, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's a delight to be with you.
Happy to be here, RJ.
So digital health is an area that's received a lot of attention, a lot of capital. Your company is scaling quite quickly. For the benefit of our audience, can you tell us about what Omada Health does and the target market it addresses?
Yeah, sure thing. So Omada Health is a between-visit care provider, and we support people with prediabetes, obesity, diabetes, hypertension, and MSK care. And just to be clear and pull up a bit, what we're trying to solve for is that experience that many have had where you leave your doctor's office and you've got your meds, you've got your care plan, but then you have questions, you don't have anyone to turn to, and there's no pull through or persistency. And that's especially true in the conditions I highlighted where, you'll leave, for instance, with diabetes and, you're told to eat better, lose weight, check your sugars, but you end up feeling lost. And so, we endeavor to do that, and we're well on the way to making a big impact there.
And how did the idea first come about? I mean, it seems like a pretty intuitive solution that, most people do need more step-by-step instructions on how to operate day by day to improve their health. But how did you first hone in on, okay, this is the actual area specifically in health that we want to approach?
Yeah, and I mean, to your comment on intuition, it's unfortunately the existing healthcare system is completely wired and handcuffed with this visit by visit mentality. And in the early days, we really sensed that. So I founded the company while in medical school, and had worked in tech before, and was on an internship, and was given a little bit of time and budget to explore what was right and off in the state of digital health. And we just recognized that digital could have an impact, but it needed to be done in an evidence-based way. It needed to be done in a way that earned trust with the medical system, that took the long road and didn't try to disrupt from the side. And so we kind of asked, well, how might one build a more evidence-based digital health company? And then second to that, if you did it, what are the care areas where digital mattered not just incrementally, but transformationally to value, to outcomes, to experience? And that led us to between visit as kind of a rubric, and specifically metabolic as a first place to start, beginning our journey in prediabetes and weight health. Just because you'd sit in homes of people with these diseases and recognize that they were just falling the cracks. And that's the experience of millions and millions of people, in the US.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like your approach, your entry point to the patient can be through the employer. Is that the predominant way you get to the end customer?
We work in three areas: with employers, with health plans that carry their own risk, and health systems that carry risk. So we're somewhat agnostic. We're happy to work with any entity that carries the financial risk for the disease areas I highlighted. And that's why they lean on Omada to support a better experience, better outcomes and savings.
And so it's just this pre-diabetes case. And so when you were structuring the solution, was it around kind of all the markers for okay, this person has the habit, hey, they're testing, their tests are in line with being pre-diabetic. And then they also have the daily habits of the eating and sort of more sedentary lifestyle to draw a diabetes conclusion.
What you're asking is, well, what makes you eligible for the Omada solutions? And it can be a biometric. It also, depending on customers, can be a certain weight threshold. It can be kind of a risk test and survey that you take. Fundamentally, the sweet spot of impact for us is where you start to see some of the expression of obesity-related disease that over time just causes, extraordinarily problematic, clinical paths for people who don't address it, which is sadly an enormous swath of the country right now.
Mm-hmm. So what happens when, say, you're following the Omada Health app and process and you're doing great, you're disciplined and, you come off it. So you're cured. Do you lose that customer?
If that's the profile that happens, great. What we have found is, like anything, it's a journey. You'll have progress, some setbacks along the way. At moments, you'll need more support, less. And I think that's just kind of a reality in dealing with chronic disease. And so we work to make sure that our members know that we are here for you. We're here persistently. We're in your pocket as your number one fan, your biggest cheerleader, your biggest advocate against your goals. So let's figure out how we adjust to what's happening right now in your life, because that's an issue with chronic disease and just the reality of just life generally is that things do ebb and flow and change. And so we want to be here with our members in the downs and the ups.
And back to the earlier days of founding the company, was the initial idea this idea that you're operating under now, or did you do a few iterations to finally get to the true product market fit?
We're blessed in having a lot of strategy consistency. Now, each and every day, the solutions matured, the go-to-market motions matured. But at the end of the day, we recognized a couple of truths. One, that people really mattered in between visit care. So every Omada member gets a care team that gets to know them, understands their goals, and supports them. Secondly, we recognized you needed a blend of devices to check in on biometric progress, as well as a great software experience that included things like communities, content, goal architecture, tracking. And a kind of an early observation was that in the market at that time, there were companies that were built in any given one of the feature sets that we knew we needed to build, but we just recognized how hard it is to get any outcomes in the space. And we really needed that full stack approach. And so bit by bit, we've just been building more robustness, personalization, scale. But the thesis is in large part, stayed consistent, which has been a real blessing.
What's been the most challenging aspect? I'm sure the challenge has changed since you've scaled, but maybe we could take it in two parts, like the early days, what was the biggest challenge? And then what's the biggest challenge currently?
Yeah, I think there's like business specific challenges and then kind of one that was specific to me in my journey. I think the business specific challenges is the US healthcare system is just extraordinarily complicated, to build a business. And tech entrepreneurs that, they come to me now and seek counsel on starting a business in healthcare. And, I make sure to share, like, look, it's the most worthwhile place you can build a business, but it's the double black diamond. It is not for the foolhardy. Like, you have to get smart on the details, all the stakeholders, how they tie together. There is a valley of death that you have to get through. And that's just a truth to innovate. I had gone to med school, but I didn't know a thing about the business of the US healthcare system. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't ramping one learning curve. It was ramping like thousands of independent learning curves and how things work and, in the regulatory environment and the payment environment. And, sometimes you feel like chasing a dollar in the US healthcare system is like that game in Harry Potter Quidditch with the golden snitch, but you have to figure it out. You have to catch that snitch. I think that was the hardest business challenge. And then on the personal front, I'd never hired anybody. I didn't know what a VC was. So there's plenty of, learning, as an entrepreneur and a first-time entrepreneur.
I mean, you were on track to become a doctor, it seems. Was that a difficult decision to depart from that path?
So I was in an MD MBA program at Harvard and had gone in thinking I'd do tech meets healthcare because I've always been drawn by both worlds. So I wouldn't say it was an unnatural departure. What happened was I just got excited about Omada. I asked the dean for a year off and, I got a year off and went for 2 years and got 2 years off and went for 3. And then, bartender cut me dry. So, I kind of just phased out. But even if I'd gone through med school, I'd be doing something like what I'm doing. It just happened, I suppose, a bit earlier than I expected.
And someone with your academic background and credentials, I would assume that raising capital was smooth sailing. Was it indeed smooth sailing?
I mean, I don't know if it's ever smooth sailing, or maybe you're doing something that's not ambitious enough. This is called risk capital for a reason. So I think the fundraising market's evolved in a positive way. When we were raising, in large part, it was silos between tech and healthcare. You talk to the tech investors and they're like, I don't know about the regulatory environment, or why are you spending that $1 million on a clinical trial? Or like, it's a little bit beyond me. And then, on the healthcare side, they're like, well, where's your monopolistic IP? Mm-hmm. So it was kind of a period of time where you needed folks that were comfortable with the intersection and convergence companies. And the numbers of those folks were smaller than they are now. So, I think it's never easy to raise money, but I think for a convergence health meets tech company, it's a better venture landscape than when I started Omada.
So you've managed to raise significant capital and from some of the best investors. You have Andreessen Horowitz, Norwest, Fidelity, et cetera. Tell us about your process of selecting these investors. Did they have certain kind of characteristics, qualities that you really said, okay, these folks would make for great partners?
The thing I've tried to hold myself and the strategy to is, do I feel a sense of strategic alignment with the investor? And I actually think that's the right heuristic if you had to pick any, because the person versus the fund tends to matter most. And if you don't just have that chemistry of strategy alignment, of imagining kind of the big things that you could accomplish, the ambition to build a defining company and see kind of a path to do that together, it becomes difficult in all the ebbs and flows and ups and downs to kind of stay centered. And so, I've been blessed from day one, having a lot of investors where that felt true. And that's kind of been my compass. And it just so happened, funnily enough, that a lot of the folks where I felt that with were like part of excellent funds. But if anything, I'd kind of prioritize the person over the fund, and we've been kind of blessed to have both great people that work at great institutions.
Mm-hmm. A little bit of a sidetrack here, but I'm curious, like what your early days were like when you were growing up. I mean, did you find that you were always veering into entrepreneurial endeavors? Were you kind of showing signs early on?
I mean, I think so. My family environment was really imaginative, creative, like kind of anything was possible. I love to build anything. Like I build the Connects roller coaster, tear it down, build it again, just addicted to roller coaster tycoon and optimizing the revenue of my theme park and the rides and the layout. And so I knew I had to build in some capacity, almost as a bit of a compulsion. So maybe I didn't recognize it as entrepreneurship because I didn't have exposure early on in my family to entrepreneurs or otherwise. But I think the core attributes were probably there.
And now that you're, I think you've raised almost like $500 million, you've brought in debt financing. I guess one question on the debt was like, does that mean you're kind of in this phase now where you're throwing off a decent amount of cash flow you can service the debt, or is there's some structuring in that? We don't have to get into too many details, but maybe it's something that gives a hint to kind of where you are kind of company-wise.
Yeah, I mean, we're operating on a funded plans, which is kind of a great thing to do. From a debt standpoint, very modest amount, which is typically advisable. I think it's a very generally bad thing for a business to try to use debt as some sort of kind of extension to runway or otherwise. We've never done that. It's just, but you can, if the business is stable and growing and mature and underwritable, you can use that to create kind of a balanced, cheaper access to capital, because equity is a very expensive, way to raise capital. So it's tend to recommend against, venture bet when people ask, but at some point in the company's maturity, it makes sense at a modest level.
And it seems that as you were describing the company and kind of the ambition for it, that this could become a really big company one day, especially when you have like this installed base of customers that you're continually dealing with. You can extend offerings. Is that the idea here, that this can be tens of millions, hundreds of millions of customers?
Well, I mean, that's the plan. We've crossed well over 1 million people that we've helped. And the moment we start to feel proud about that internally or externally, I try to remind Omadans or others that there are just many, many tens, hundreds of millions of people in need across the globe with the conditions we support. So we've got to keep our ambitions high. We've got to turn that 1 million into 10 million, into 50 million and beyond. And the scale of our ambitions needs to meet the scale of the problem. I've kind of proverbially felt like we're at the starting line at Omada, where it's always about what you're going to do, not what you're done, which I think is probably the right mindset. So yeah, I mean, that's the hope, to really just make a material difference in disease epidemiology.
One of the keys to scaling, of course, is people and bringing in the right talent. And, frequently entrepreneurs say it's the toughest part of the business is like identifying and bringing in the right talent. How have you done so far in terms of bringing in the right talent?
I'll totally agree. I mean, that is one of the toughest parts. And boy, I've gone to great lengths to recruit as exceptional people as possible. Now, I haven't had a perfect hit rate. I mean, I think that even the best leaders, maybe 20% of the time you're going to make a mistake because someone's ability to perform is so circumstantial relative to like what the needs are of today, your environment, et cetera. So you can't have perfection. Very proud of the current state of Omada's executive team, our team generally. And that's so important because the moments where I've rested most uneasy at Omada was where I just knew I had a function that was failing or something that needed to be fixed. So your personal stress level is quite tied to the caliber of the talent. And helplessly as you grow, I mean, as a CEO, you're going to be surprised by what's happening in your organization. And the surprises, if they're amazing, or wow, like we pulled off something that's just remarkable. It's always related to just the incredible people that join your mission and give it their all.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about your culture and maybe how you came about developing that culture.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've been, I think, pretty intentional. It's important to us. I think it's important to us to create a feel that you can do well by doing good, but remain, extraordinarily ambitious and decisive and, and hardworking. So I think step one is being specific and clear on the mission statement, the vision statement, the company strategy. Because without a sense of like where you're going, it's actually tough to shape culture. And so if you feel that you're getting like angst and cultural angst within an organization, step one is probably like, do people have a shared vision of where and why? And so that's always been important. I mean, Omada has our strategy on a page. We call it our SOAP. Everybody's, sees it, gets it. Every year we kind of re-architect it, lays out the specific objectives for the year and just kind of re-articulates the strategy. And then from there, it's about values and not just codifying them, but ensuring that they're part of key organizational processes. And a mistake I sometimes find is people don't attach a value to a behavior. It's like a value is not world-class products. It's kind of the behaviors inside the organization that could create that experience. So we put a lot of time and thought into not only the values that we have at Omada, but also just how they're embedded into really our corporate processes, which starts from hiring, to be honest, but then even goes through performance reviews, how we highlight them when we celebrate achievements, reflect on setbacks, et cetera.
And as you've gone through this entrepreneurial journey and building the company, getting it to, bigger and bigger stages, has there been like one leadership insight that was kind of like an unlock for you? Like maybe you had not like realized that a true catalyst to kind of accelerating growth would be to operate in a slightly different manner. Any insight on leadership that you could share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. One, I mean, for the entrepreneurs out there, I mean, the role changes a lot. I've gone from Omada, from me and 2 people to, well over 700 people. And what's required of the CEO role, taking yourself out of it, does change. So it's probably been like a couple versions of that. I think that as the company evolves and grows, clear communication becomes ever more important. Creating the right communication scaffolding within your organization becomes ever more important. Amongst your executive team, nurturing and fostering an ability to not shy away from, but instead endorse and lean into vigorous debates on topic where you're putting the idea, out on the table, detaching it from anyone's personal identity and thinking, like, what's the best on behalf of Omada as we beat up the concept is kind of the right mindset. And those are things that, because I started from a level where I, again, hadn't hired anybody, I felt like I've kind of learned over time, and it's really stage specific.
Mm-hmm. We're heading into the tail end. I have 2 final questions. One is, can you tell us about a person who has had a profound influence on you?
One I continue to think of is, one of my bosses at IDEO when I was on an internship there returned to Omada. And it's because I saw him lead and interact with C-suite at Fortune 500s in just the most extraordinarily authentic way. And the reason that that's carried influence with me is I had thought at that level of development that, like, wow, when you're a C-level leader, you have to like be different and act differently. And I just watched him not do that. And that worked really well. And it was kind of the first example of like authentic leadership where you realize that you can just be yourself and that actually can work. And so that, I think, is a really important aha, because at the end of the day, if you don't lead in a way that's authentic to who you are, which it's absolutely acceptable and there will be variance on that, it's never going to work. Like, you're never going to get your rhythm and your groove. And so that was, it sounds small, but it's really kind of a profound realization that I've carried into Omada.
That's a great insight. Last question. Can you tell us about a charity, cause, or other endeavor that you're passionate about?
Yeah, I mean, I have many, but I guess I'll stick closer to home. I'm very worried about the state of primary care in the US now. Solutions like Omada that are between visit can, in some ways, ameliorate some of the difficulties. But there's a looming, I would say it's here, just primary care crisis in the US, where there's zero chance the number of primary care docs or NPs, or, PAs that are needed are just going to appear magically. And so it's something that's very vexing. And I think it's extraordinarily problematic for the country. I mean, we hear these stories from our members where, oh my gosh, I can't get a primary care doc, or at most I can get one that will take me 3 months from now. So that's something where obviously we're trying to help in what way we can support primary care with Omada, but that's one that, any chance that I see that, I can help raise visibility to this, I seek to do.
Excellent. Well, Sean, I want to thank you again for taking the time for this conversation. It's been a great one.
Super. Yeah. Thank you so much, RJ.